And so so you go from holistic mission and development to this idea of possessing the land. Before we even talk about social justice, how do we possess the land? How do we
Yeah,
possess the land?
that is a very important question. With reference to how do we possess the land? You see,
What do we need? How should
the
we be empowered? How do we need to think?
yeah. So I believe that it's first start with an identity and a consciousness,
Hmm.
and that identity and that consciousness, we must first talk about the regaining or the reclamation of that identity and the
Hmm.
affirmation of that. So it is not only regaining it, but also the affirmation of that. That is the proclamation of that identity. It is very critical.
Hmm.
So now we are thinking of how do we possess the land? You cannot possess the land if you are not aware, if you are not
Hmm.
conscious of what you need, number one, and also what is required. What you need and what is required. What you need in reference to what God is also saying concerning that, and what is required, what you also need to obtain in the process. So there is what I refer to the righteous requirements of God, right? And also the righteousness of men. So Jesus, when he walked the earth, he said, to fulfill all righteousness, this will have to be so. And God, to fulfill all righteousness, he needed to send Jesus. So there are two main entities within this equation of possessing the land, because we must understand that the land is the land is an inheritance, it's a heritage, it's a place from which we assess the unsearchable riches of Christ or of God. So first of
Hmm.
all, what do we need? What we need is the Christ. And what is
Hmm.
required? What is required in the Christ is our maturity in the Christ. So now the whole issue of what is needed is what God has given, which is what Christ. But our maturity in Christ has not been given. It is a state depending on the amount of work you put in. So some can still be children, and others can be old men in Christ. So that is not
Hmm.
a given. It's not that which is given, but He has given us all that is required, right, in Christ Jesus. But that is not that speaks to the need, right? When he said that rendition, if you check it speaks to the need, what we needed to be a part of Christ. But in terms of our ascent in Christ, it is not a free gift. It is an issue of
Hmm.
stature, level, so that the child, he said that though he's hot and hair, he's not different from a slave. So the land may be yours. The land may have been entrusted to you. But if you, number one, you have not even come to the place of that critical consciousness of the Christ in you, you cannot appropriate the land. So, number one, what is needed is our man needed Christ, and that is what God gave. But there is also a righteous requirement on the side of man, that is his maturity, his growth in this Christ. Because to possess the land is not a thing that you do like the Crusaders who said we want to go possess Israel. No, that is not what it means to possess the land. To possess the land is a lifestyle within a certain consciousness, and your dominance becomes a fruit of that lifestyle. Your faith. So it's not like I'm going to Canada to possess the Canada, then I'm going to organize a coup. No, that is not how it works. But you become, by default, you become the light of that space you occupy, and the world cannot do without you. It's a default experience. The goal of the Christian is to become Christ, our becoming of Christ. if I said to become Christ, is to mature and grow up in his stature, in his ranking, in his authority, in his power, and in his name. That is the principal work of the believer. The principal work of a believer, the call of God for every believer, is not to necessarily be the light. To be the light is the end, is the glory of the believer. And that glory is by default. It's a default experience. But the genuine call of God is for us to become Christ. That's how come he gave Christ the first principle, the first thing. He gave us Christ. So to possess the land becomes an automatic experience. Like Peter, he walked and his shadow was even what healed the sick, a default experience. Aprons was brought to the body of Paul and it went about healing the sick. It's a default experience. So majority of Christians are focusing on the default things, on the things that are automatic, the things that will happen when the key or the most important component is attained. Most Christians are rather focusing on those things and they're not focusing on the maturity, the growth, the transition from the place of childhood to the place of maturity. Until we begin to focus on that, and in our churches, we begin to ask, I've been in this space for 3 years. How am I accounting for my growth? How have I journeyed or transformed? What is my line of transformation? Until we begin to ask these critical questions, we may just be in a certain kind of yeah, I don't know how I'll put it, a certain kind of space that is not transforming. The church space must be a transforming space. A transforming space in reference to Christ, not to another man, not to ourselves. Because Christ is the possession of all things. Christ is the completeness, the consummation of all things. So as you possess Christ, you possess the land. It's automatic. As you possess Christ, you possess the land.
As you possess Christ, I gotta make a note of that. As you possess Christ, you possess the land.